So today it gives me great pleasure to invite our speaker and our keynote, Dr. Norris, who's a GP over Cottingham, just north of Hull.
Yeah.
She's also the chair of the subcommittee of the GPC for sessional GPs. Mm-hmm. She's been involved with with GP survival, although she's stepped away from that now and supporting them. But she's very aware of the challenges that we GPs are facing. Currently, she's also supporting GP resilience, and I'm really, really pleased about the fact that she's also a champion for NB Medical, looking at how we can deliver high quality care that will ultimately lead to reduced costs and improve our quality of life. So, with great pleasure, I'd like to introduce her. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone. Hopefully you're all recovering if you've been at work today and you've just had 5 minutes to sit quietly and have a little bit of food and have a wee, which you may not have managed so far today. Yes, we're going to talk about a few different things this evening. Hopefully it's going to be helpful and useful. So let's get going. Ramadan Mubarak to those of our colleagues who are beginning their fast either today or over the next few days. Lots of really good information out there in terms of supporting our patients who are doing that as well, that we were tweeting about today. A little bit about me. Most importantly, I'm a mum. I have 2 small people, one of whom turns 6. The littlest one turns 6 this weekend. So my weekend has been full of excitement and early starts and doing lots of exciting things. And I'm one of those portfolio GPs, which really means I can't quite decide what I want to do. I've been salaried, I've been a partner, I've been a locum, and now I kind of do a bit of everything. So I work in a fully salaried practice, one of the smaller ones in our area that couldn't recruit and were taken over by the local foundation trust. I locum for Medical Chambers. I work for Yorkshire Medical Chambers and lead one of their groups. I'm a GP appraiser, promise on a really nice one, not one of the scary ones. My job with GPC, as we've said, is representing sessional GPs, so if you are working in any capacity other than being a partner, then you get me at national level being gobby on your behalf. And I like writing angry things about the NHS as well. I have a column in Pulse and do a bit of blogging. And I present for NB Medical Hot Topics, which is the most fun bit of my job. So I'm obviously very happy to chat to any of you this evening, but if you think of something or something you want to talk to me about down the line or anything to get in touch, I'm on NHS Net. I'm Zoe.Norris. I'm fairly simple to find. So, modern general practice. We're kind of in the middle of it, aren't we, in this area? It's all going on. What does it mean? Why is it different? And we're harking back to the good old days. I'm doing it now. I'm harking back to when I first qualified and there were gaps in my afternoon surgery. It was amazing. And I asked for a partnership at the practice that I was salaried at and they didn't have any. This was an alien world. So we're not just GPs, are we? Now we're expert generalists. We're consultants in multi-morbidity. We continue to be our patient advocates. But do you find yourself maybe having to advocate for things that perhaps you wouldn't have had to fight for in the past? Suddenly you can spend a long time on the phone trying to get stuff for your patient that really should be pretty basic and pretty assured. Gatekeepers, another challenge, isn't it? Nobody says rationing. Feels quite a lot like rationing, doesn't it? Especially when you get lots of emails saying that your local hospital is on turquoise alert. Don't send anyone in for a laugh, because that's what we're obviously doing. And very much we are still at the front line of the NHS. So it's a changing world. The other thing that's happening is the roles within our practice are changing. Our other staff, our colleagues, their roles are changing. So our receptionists, if you've got good receptionists, are a wonder to behold, aren't they? When they have a really challenging patient, they're very good at protecting us, very good at dealing with things. Our practice managers are amazing. I've no idea how they manage to do the job. They know everything and can do everything. But it's a bit stressful, isn't it? All of this makes it stressful. Can you currently do the job that you want to do for your patients in this brave new world? Have we got enough GPs to be able to deliver that care? And does the workload that we're faced with match the resources that we've got? Pretty much no to most of those, isn't it? And this is what happens. So come Monday morning, maybe you've had a nice weekend with your family and you go to work and you're full of enthusiasm and you're really going to try today, you're going to make sure you don't prescribe antibiotics to anybody, no one's getting anything that they shouldn't have, you're super resilient with a match on the left. And then by about 10:30, you're the match on the right and you're ready to go home already, aren't you? And certainly my personal resilience very much depends on what's going on at home, what time of day it is, what day of the week it is, and whether or not I've had a chance to eat lunch. So we're going to talk a bit about resilience and about what that means and how it can help us in this brave new world. Things that affect my resilience are headlines like this. Ooh, we're failing. We're failing. What else are we doing? Oh, we're dangerous. Also dangerous. Failing. Again. Yeah, marvellous. Oh, we're too busy to see children. We're just too busy. Probably playing golf, aren't we? Oh, we're making money. If anyone's got 162 million, could I have some? That would be nice, please. Oh, yeah, we don't want to see people face to face. Now it's all video and Skype, isn't it? That's marvellous. My particular favourite is this chap. Does anyone know who this is? I've just bought a prize. No one would have won. This is from a chap called Professor Merriam Thomas, who is a consultant down in London. He particularly dislikes female GPs. We are the scourge of the NHS. It's our fault that the whole system's fallen to bits. And then there's been a witch hunt against this guy just because he said things about that. So once we've dealt with all this, we're feeling really positive, aren't we? Then up he pops with his smiley face. What a guy. So it feels a bit like this, doesn't it, at the moment in the NHS? It feels a little bit as though everything is a challenge. And if we cross out the adult bit and just say actually being a GP feels a bit like riding a bike on fire in hell, then that gives you a reasonable idea as to what a day can be like in general practice. So all things considered, how are you? How are you doing? Burnout is a big topic at the moment. It's something that has been in the journals. We are the hot topic, aren't we? And the BMJ described this as an epidemic in the medical workforce. Mental health crisis, and it isn't just GPs, is it? It's all our staff. It's our nursing colleagues, it's our practice managers, it's our receptionists. Does anyone ever feel like this? Now, if you do, can I suggest you passed over into that bit where you're in burnout rather than just feeling a bit stressed? And that's the thing, isn't it? Yes, we see all those headlines. It's a busy job. We're dealing with people who are poorly and they're vulnerable and they're stressed, and we're trying to juggle and be lots of different things to different people. Nobody thought being a doctor was going to be a walk in the park. We know it's a stressful job for all of us. So at what point do we need to recognise, actually, I've gone from stress towards burnout? What kind of things are we looking for? So just ask yourself, when was the last time you had a day that wasn't stressful? And I don't mean a bit busy, I mean stressful that you want to tear your hair out. When did you last have a good day at work? And that's maybe a question for your other half. Because we go home, don't we, and we have a whinge, don't we? This has happened today, and this happened. But when was the last time you went home and said, you know what, oh God, I saw this woman today. I had one this morning. I saw a patient for the first time. She had intractable migraines. I thought, oh, I've read a new paper about that. I'm going to start her on some candesartan and feel really clever about it. And she rang me back today and said, it's brilliant. I only had 2 headaches in the whole month. And I walked around feeling smug with myself for a little while. And I will tell my husband about that because it doesn't happen that often. And if you are finding that actually everything is getting very negative and you're on that treadmill and you're not enjoying work anymore, then we need to do something about that, don't we? Those of you who are on social media, this was a tweet from an ITU registrar a few months ago, and it's this vending machine at the hospital. The light inside has broken, but I still work. And that kind of sums up burnout, doesn't it? Because we never stop working. When was the last time you had a day off work? Unless there's bodily fluids exploding from one end or the other, generally speaking, we drag ourselves in, don't we? And we're there the whole time because we don't want to let people down, we don't want to let the patients down. Or maybe the joy has gone out of your work and actually you're just dreading it. But we still keep going, even though that light has gone out. And it's really important that we try and do something about that because it's not good for us and it's not good for our patients. Some options that you could try. The MMC are going to sponsor seals for everybody to bring this into practice. You'll be pleased to know. If actually you are struggling, or you have colleagues that are struggling, there is help out there. And I've spoken very openly about the fact that I've struggled with burnout and I've struggled with depression as a result of the partnership that I was in and the challenges I faced in that. And I went to see the GP Health Service. They were amazing. I'm now one of many colleagues who's largely sponsored by SSRIs and gin. That's not what they prescribe, by the way. They don't just give you alcohol. But it's incredible when you start talking about it. Loads of colleagues are the same, and people will come up to you and say, "God, that's how I felt. I feel like that. I found this helps. That helps." So there is help out there. Please access that help if you need it. What we want to do is we want to be like this canary. So if you think of the NHS like a coal mine, and in the coal mine, the conditions aren't great. And as things get worse and worse, the canaries get sent in, don't they? We're watching the canaries to see what happens. Now, if the canary keels over and dies, is that because the canary wasn't resilient enough? Is that because they haven't gone through their resilience training? The GMC say that we should all have resilience training so we can get through GMC investigations, just like soldiers going out to war zones. That's the same level of training they want us to have, which seems hugely disrespectful to our armed forces and also feels very unrealistic as to what they think we do and what we need to be resilient about. So actually, if there's a problem at work, and if you're finding it difficult, it's not your fault. It's not because you're not working hard enough, you're not being resilient enough. It's because actually the conditions that you're being put in at the moment are such that it's really hard. So we want to find out how we can put that gas mask on, don't we? What is resilience not? And one of the frequent criticisms I hear about resilience is partly from definitions like the GMCs, where actually it's nothing to do with resilience, and also because some people take it too far. So resilience is not about restricting access or services. That's not what it's about. It's not about hoarding them, the pirate with his gold, only giving them out when we really want to. And it's not an excuse to be an ass, basically. It's not an excuse to be negative all the time. You don't say, well, I'm being resilient, so I'm tough, everything's crap. Well, actually, that's not really helpful, is it? It's also not about blame. It's not your fault. It's not my fault. It's about trying to find a way through in difficult circumstances. And resilience doesn't work if it comes from the top down. If your employer, if Mr. Hunt pops up tomorrow at your practice and says, I'm going to teach you how to be more resilient, you should do X, Y, Z, that's not going to help, is it? It needs to come from the individuals and at practice level. It doesn't work if it's imposed. There is not a right or wrong answer as to how to do this because everyone is different. Every one of us and every practice is different. But what resilience is very personal. And those of you who are on Facebook, who may be on the Resilient GP group, you'll see every now and again amongst the posts about what we should do about X, Y, and Z, that people will put, this is my resilience, and there'll be a picture of a cat, or a beach, or a child, probably their child. You know, there'll be something that has cheered that patient up, or a gift that someone's bought them. It's very personal, but it's also empowering. Feeling in control again. There's nothing worse than feeling out of control. I don't know how many of you have been patients yourself. Hideous. If you're a medical professional and you find yourself laid in a hospital bed, God, it's horrible. And actually, that loss of power can be really distressing. And at work, it feels a little bit like everything's running away from us. So being resilient means being empowered, being able to be proactive, to see things coming, but also be reactive. We want to be clear about what general practice is, and it's different, and it's changing, and recognising that doesn't mean we can't do the job. So we just need to work out how we do it in a slightly different way. And the thing that gets me all the time is people saying, well, I don't like this resilience thing because it's saying no to patients, and I want to be there for my patients. And I turn around to them and say, so when you're working your 14-hour days, and you haven't slept well because you've been thinking about work, and you're really stressed, and you've worked all day, you've not stopped, you've not drunk anything, you've not peed, you've eaten just some Haribo from the God box, are you the best doctor you can be? Are you looking after your patients when you get to the end of that day, and you're filing those blood results, and actually all you can think about is going home to see the kids because you missed bedtime again, you're not the best doctor you can be. So resilience is about saying, you know what, I need 5 minutes. I need 5 minutes. I'm already late, I'm easily late all the time. I need 5 minutes to have a drink, to eat something, to go to the loo, and just to take a moment. And there's nothing wrong with that, but as a profession, we struggle with that concept. Let's put the gas mask on, and preferably ring your LMC at the same time, because they're pretty handy. So this is the definition that we like to use of resilience with Hot Topics and Resilient GP. So pushing back at unreasonable situations proactively and reactively for the sake of everyone. Your patient, yourself and the profession. And part of that, a significant part of that now, is about managing workload in a realistic way. I would love to see every patient that wanted to see me, and I would love to give them all 20 or 30 minutes of my time. But I can't, and neither can you. So we need to be realistic about that. And unfortunately that means addressing some of the challenges that we face. This is the judge. Judge John Deed. I spent many happy hours watching this when I was younger. We're going to talk about the Blood test. And we're going to go through some scenarios. So I just want you to have in your mind Judge John Deed when we talk about these things. So here are some scenarios for you. Let's see how resilient we're all feeling. So you've had a phone call, reception have come in and said we've got funeral directors on the phone. They're quite a way away, about 50 miles away, and they've got one of our patients there. They want you to go and do the death certificate and the creme form, please, and they need it urgently. Except it's Friday lunchtime, you finished morning surgery, you're about to go out and do your visits. You've got visits to do, then you've got fully booked surgery that afternoon. So we've got this urgent request from the funeral director. So what are we going to do? Should we say, no, please tell them actually I'm not going to issue that death certificate? Should we say, well, actually that's a long way away, I'm not sure I can take that time out. Can you ask them if they can bring the patient nearer so that I would be able to do that? Maybe go and see them on Monday. Should you tell the funeral directors that actually you'll go when you finish your afternoon surgery? Or should you go when you've done your home visits but before your afternoon surgery? What would everyone like to do? Who would like to refuse to issue a certificate? Say no, not doing that. Okay, that's too resilient. Let's not be that resilient. Who would like to ask the funeral directors to bring the patient nearer? Quite a few hands, okay. Who would like to tell them that you'll go after afternoon surgery? No more, we're all going home, it's Friday. Who would like to go after their home visits and before their afternoon surgery? Are the rest of you just not going to go? Because that's really mean. So, this is just to give you an idea. This is not an uncommon scenario. There's lots of talk about this scenario and what are our duties, what are our contractual obligations, what are our moral and ethical obligations in this scenario. So clearly we can't refuse to issue a death certificate. That's not going to work. If we go after our home visits before our afternoon surgery, actually that's having an impact on our other patients, isn't it? Not apart from the fact that it's going to be really stressful for us driving around the countryside, but that's not fair to those patients who've probably been waiting several weeks for an appointment with you and are sat there. If you go after afternoon surgery, then that's not going to impact on your patients, but it's going to impact on you. And it's Friday night, and you probably want to go home and have tea and see your other half. And that's where you do need to say, actually, do you know what? This dead person will still be dead on Monday. And it's not unreasonable. So what we should be doing is asking that funeral director to move the patient nearer to us, which they can do, and they quite often have reciprocal arrangements. That's the kind of scenario, if you're getting into stickiness and they're being difficult and you're not sure where you stand, you check with the LMC. What you don't do is get them to bring them to the car park outside the surgery. This has happened. And clamber in the back of the hearse to check, because that doesn't go down very well. Definitely don't do that. Okay, MRI scan. Your patient's coming to see you. They've been asked to have an MRI of their leg by the orthopaedic consultant, and they've told the radiology department that they have claustrophobia. So you've had a very nice letter from the radiology department. This is a real letter. They've suggested some oral sedation prior to the MRI. Please could you prescribe 30 milligrams of temazepam if they're under 50, and if they're over 50, 20 milligrams of temazepam. So, are we going to prescribe the sedation as they have asked us to do in the letter? Are we going to refuse to prescribe the sedation for this patient? Are we going to prescribe it but at a dose maybe that we feel more comfortable with? Or are we going to say to the patient, actually, I'm afraid you need to go back to the consultant secretary or to radiology and talk to them about this, I can't help? Or are we going to write a letter to either the orthopaedic consultant or the radiology department highlighting that maybe they should be organising the sedation rather than us? Who would like to prescribe the sedation? Okay, good. I think we'll liberate a lot. Oh, look, there he is, look, he pops up. Who would refuse to prescribe the sedation? Yeah, well done you. Well done that man. Who would prescribe sedation but maybe at a different dose? Okay, a few people doing that. Yeah, okay. Who would ask them to go to speak to the consultant secretary, bounce them back that way? Yeah, okay. And who would write a letter? Okay. So I think those last two depends a little bit on how much time you've got, doesn't it? If it's the middle of a duty doctor day, you're not going to take time out to write a letter. Although it may be a very good stroppy letter, but you're not going to. If it's busy, then you may just say, actually this patient may not even get to you. This may come from reception line, the patient's rung, they've asked this, no, we can bounce that back. Or it may be that you think, actually, I'm just going to highlight this to my colleagues in hospital, and you take a bit of time. If we prescribe sedation as it's detailed in the letter, it certainly feels like an uncomfortable dose, doesn't it? That's quite a big dose. Prescribing sedation at a dose you feel is safe. This is a really straightforward scenario in the sense that we have very clear guidance on this from the Association of Anaesthetists and Radiologists, that whoever prescribes the sedation must be in a position to monitor that patient when they are under its influence. So unless you are able to be present in the MRI department with them when they're having that scan, we shouldn't be prescribing sedation for them, even a teeny tiny dose, because we don't know how they'll react, and if there's a problem, then we find ourselves in front of this chap, don't we? And the conversation goes, well, I had a letter from the hospital asking me to prescribe a large amount of benzodiazepines for someone with claustrophobia. I didn't feel comfortable with that, so I prescribed a lower dose, or maybe you prescribed the dose they'd asked for. So I decided that that would be appropriate. We issued it to the patient. Unfortunately, they had a cardiac arrest while they were in the MRI scanner. No, I wasn't there to supervise them because I was in my surgery looking after patients. Malud. Suddenly it feels a bit more uncomfortable, doesn't it? So actually we have clear guidance on this case, and this is a really good example where absolutely we want to help the patient. We may know them very well, they may feel really worried about this, but we have to do what's safe. And part of being resilient is knowing what the guidance is, knowing where to check if you're not sure. So if the hospital is repeatedly asking GPs in the area to do this, it goes to the LMC. So this is their responsibility. It's a decision for the radiologist. It's a decision for them within the department as to what they do. Ganfid. Does anyone know what Ganfid means? Get a note from your doctor. Do you get lots of requests for these? I need a note from a doctor for insert problem. So you've got a mum who's come to see you with a small child, and they've got a cold. And she said, the school has said I need to get a note from you to say that they've been off school with this because they don't believe me, and so they've said that I need to get a doctor's note. Do you want to write a letter to the school and charge them for it? Do you want to give the child a med free? Would you like to say, no thanks, I'm not doing that? Would you like to just write the letter, not worry about charging for it? Or would you like to say to mum, well, school needs to contact the surgery with the appropriate consent, and then we would charge them, and then when they pay, we would do the letter. Who would like to write a letter and charge for it? Okay, who would like to give them a med free? A surprising amount of people do that. Who would like to just say no, not going to do a letter? Who would like to write to the school with a big smiley face? And who would like to ask mum to get school to contact them? Yeah, okay. So, tricky, isn't it? Always tricky, and you kind of feel stuck in the middle a little bit. This is non-contractual work. Okay? We don't get paid to do this. This is not part of our core contract. So if you're going to do this, it's going to take your time, it's going to take your staff's time to do it. And potentially it means every time this child has a cold and they come to see a doctor or a nurse, that you have to provide something as well. Some practices will do the stamping of an appointment card, won't they? Rather than doing a letter, you know, no, fine, you've been here, that's okay. But then they're still going to come back, and we're still potentially creating work. So if this was a one-off really complex incident, maybe this is a child who's got cancer or some kind of chronic condition, you feel actually you need that dialogue with school, and probably want to pick up the phone. If it's just school being a pain in the arse and trying it on, well, either we're not playing or we're going to charge them a lot of money to do that. But we don't know the background here. We only see that child for a tiny amount of time. What if the child has other issues going on at home? What if there are safeguarding concerns about this child? What if their school attendance is low because of lots of other issues? And by us giving a note, it gives a huge amount of authority and credibility to that absence. I'm married to a teacher, and one of the things that he finds difficult is when this happens, and they have kids they're really concerned about, but actually, if there's a doctor's note, it's very difficult for school to challenge that. So, to be as awkward as possible, I would do the last one, or I'd just say, I'm sorry, we don't do that. But it's going to depend. And again, if you're getting the same request from the same school over and over again, time to get a snotty letter from the LMC set saying that actually our GPs don't do this. Get a bit deflected. Yes, you're waving a pen at me.
You talked on number 2 about this sort of researching information and getting advice from the LMC. We had this school issue. And we discovered there was an agreement between the Department of Health and the Department of Education that schools should not ask for notes from doctors. That's the information we found.
Yeah, and it's fascinating how much of that kind of guidance is out there. When I was preparing this, I was looking at the guidance about benefits, about, you know, GPs supporting letters for benefit appeals and things, and it says really clearly on the government website, you should not ask your GP for additional supporting evidence. It says it, but we still get all the requests, don't we? And you wonder where that's coming from. And I did pick up the phone once thinking I've had enough of this and tried to ring my local job centre and ended up talking to someone in Southampton, because you can only go through the central number, and the fact I was a doctor and wanted to talk to someone down the road, it didn't matter. So you're absolutely right. Quite often there is guidance on this, and you just have to keep reminding people about it. So if you're not sure, then it's definitely worth trying to find out. Number 4, teeth. We like teeth, don't we? So patient is on triage for you, they've got toothache, they're not registered with a dentist. What are we going to do? Are we going to ask them to come in, assess them, and advise that they see a dentist? Are we going to say, well, there's no point in coming in, this is a dental problem, you need to go and see a dentist? Are we going to give them some pain relief and suggest they see a dentist? Are we going to give them some antibiotics and some pain relief? Or are we going to give them antibiotics, pain relief, and say they should see a dentist? Who would like to just not see this patient? Yeah, I mean, generally, I don't really want to see that many patients at all. So we could not see them, couldn't we? We could say, nope, doesn't even get past go. Just go straight to a dentist and give them contact details for the emergency dentist. And actually, the advice has changed on this, because we went from a number of years ago being fairly relaxed and happy about prescribing for dental things, lots of us have done that, to absolutely not. You should never even touch a patient with a dental problem. The challenge with that is it isn't always a dental problem, is it? And we know that patients can come with all kinds of other things. They could have trigeminal neuralgia, they have an ear infection with radiation, there could be lots of things. And we also do need to do some safety netting, don't we? We need to make sure they haven't got a massive facial cellulitis. I can't remember the last time, I don't think I've ever seen one of those, but we still have a responsibility. So we can assess that patient, make sure they're not septic, and they don't need to be admitted as an emergency to max facts. But actually, other than that, we shouldn't do anything. And again, there's really clear advice on this, clear advice and guidance. Your medical legal protection, your defence union cover will cover you for that basic assessment, but they will not cover you for any other form of dental treatment because you're not a dentist. This is a picture of my brother. It's not just there for a laugh. Simon is a consultant in restorative I'm not really sure. I think it's dentistry, could be facial surgery, something to do with teeth. But he spent 5 years at dental school. 5 years at dental school. It's a lot to know about teeth. I don't think we even did it at medical school. So part of me also thinks there must be something they've taught him over 5 years or the rest of his career that probably I don't know about. And that tends to be what I say to patients. Say, look, dentists train for a long time to do what they do. And actually, I don't know anything about teeth. And it's really interesting to just look at the guidelines for when you would treat someone. And there's hardly any occasion. It's only if a hospital is a million miles away and they've got massive facial cellulitis that you would even consider giving antibiotics. So really worth checking on that one. GP to chase. I'm sure you never get these because I'm sure your local hospitals are so well trained that you never get asked to do this. So you've got a lovely letter from the hospital. Doesn't say anything apart from GP to chase, MRI results and organised echo. How marvellous of them. So shall we request those tests and then forward them on to the consultant that they've seen? Shall we say, actually, this is the hospital's job, I'm not going to do anything with this, nothing to do with me. Should we write to the consultant, very politely saying, I'm not your house officer, you can do your own test, mate. Should we organise the echo, but not look at the MRI, or should we just chase the MRI and organise an echo? Who would like to get the test organised and forward the results? No, you're either very resilient or asleep. Who's ignoring it? Who's going, no? Okay. Who's writing back to the consultant with some particular choice language? Lovely. Lovely. We like a good letter. Who's organising an echo, but maybe not the MRI result? No. And who's just going to crack on and get it done? No. Okay. So very clear that this is not our responsibility. Very clear on a number of levels, not least because if you request investigations, you are responsible for acting on the results. So not only should the consultant be chasing the MRI results, and I've had this before where I was asked to look at results for an MRI brain and I didn't understand anything of them apart from the patient's name. It was like another language. So when the patient sat in front of you and you then have to say, I'm really sorry I don't understand these results because I'm not a neurologist. And if we organise the echo and that echo comes back, what are we going to do with it? So that is not our responsibility, and this is in the hospital contract. It is a contractual requirement for the hospital to do this and not pass it to us. So we are on absolutely firm ground here in pushing back. And again, if you've managed to get your admin team skilled, this shouldn't get anywhere near. As soon as it comes in, it should be bounced straight back. And the LMC can easily help with that, and there's a whole load of resources we'll talk about in a second.
Can I just jump in on that? We have a duty to monitor and make sure the care provided by the hospital is of adequate quality.
Okay.
So there's sort of a slight blurring. I still believe we're not the JHAs, and I agree we don't write these letters quite constantly. But I'm just wondering, does that blurredness come in? It's a bit like you get a result and it's not your duty to follow it up. But at the same time, if it's there and then you stand in front of the bud, and he says, well, you got the results, did you not ring and make sure it was okay, or did you not do something?
Yeah.
There is a slight blurring there.
There is, absolutely. It depends what it is. So I think, for me, option number 2 isn't really viable. To just completely ignore that letter and say, this isn't my job. Because if we're ignoring it, we need to still make sure someone's chasing the MRI results and someone's chasing the ultrasound scanner. So whether that's a letter back, whether that's a phone call, whether that's actually on this occasion, this is a patient in front of me who's really complicated, who's worried, who I know really well, do you know what, on this occasion, actually I'm going to do it, and then I'm going to write a snotty letter. So none of this is set in stone, and you're right, we need to make sure that things are still being delivered.
I'm thinking more of the most common one. I've had 5 of today as a district nurse took the swab.
Oh yeah.
And it's 5 today, and I'm not sure exactly how much responsibility I have to make sure the district nurse is picking up their own caseload.
Well, I'm going to turn to the LMC on that one, because I know what I would do. What would the LMC say?
Turn to the GPC and ask for their advice.
It's not a local problem.
I think again, we are the advocates for patients, aren't we? We should be. And I guess you're going to come into that. Is how far do we go with supporting patients, and what about supporting ourselves and looking at the overall pressures? I personally, from an LMC perspective, I'd like to see GP practices and the hospital and community services coming together to talk about these scenarios and start to say, how do we share that workload? Because actually, the problem is you could pass it back to the consultant, but if it's a 3-consultant department and 2 of them are off sick and there's only 1 consultant and they're really struggling, well, we're part of the same team, aren't we? And there's something about the teamwork as well as supporting the patient and whatever. But if someone's taking the mic, that's it.
It's hard, isn't it? I mean, 5 in the day is a lot. And I think, for me, I always think of the potassium, you know, someone else has done blood, so the potassium comes through and it's 7. Well, I can't ignore that, and I can't send a letter saying, well, I'm not going to look at this. But actually, if it's something non-urgent, and if it's happening repeatedly, the guidance is, and the GMC guidance for us is, you do not request a test unless you are able to follow up and act on the results. Now, I can't imagine that's different for nurses, so I would probably be pushing that back on that, but saying, look, clearly there's an issue here. If you're doing the swabs and then the results are coming to us, what's the problem? Do you not have access to someone? Do you not know how to interpret them? Why is it coming to us as GPs?
I think they're coming to us for information, and I'm assuming they're getting them in parallel. So we're getting a copy of it and not a copy of it.
Yeah, so it may be as simple as that. So you're just getting copied in which case, great, we don't need to do anything.
Going back to my point of making sure our duty of care, make sure that they have. I'm not going to phone the district nurses 5 times every day and say,
No.
doesn't come through.
So what would you do?
Write a letter.
There's some very good letters. You could just do a standard one, just get the secretaries to insert a name of professional. It's hard, and I kind of agree with you that we're all part of the same team. But the stroppy militant bit of me thinks general practice has been under massive pressure, and we're under massive pressure, and we never get bailed out. No matter how bad it gets, the buck stops with us as GPs, particularly partners. If the hospital gets in trouble, they're bailed out, and they're given money. And they're not allowed to go into the red, they're not allowed to shut, they're not allowed to hand their contract back, they're not going personally bankrupt. So part of me thinks, actually, part of us pushing back is because people aren't listening. And we're saying we're under pressure, and no one's listening, and actually are not listening, the government aren't listening. If we push back and put the hospital under pressure, yeah, it's shitty for our hospital colleagues, but people listen when hospitals are under pressure. And actually, there's nothing worse than my colleague Susie. She's married to an orthopaedic registrar. So when she writes snotty letters, the consultant that gets them reads them out to her husband and says, who the hell is this Dr. Bailey who's writing to me telling me what I'm contractually advised to do? And they're all under pressure too. But actually, I think we kind of have to be prepared to do it a bit. And that you can't replace talking. I agree, we should sit and talk to our colleagues. You want the LNC to talk to the hospital trust, to talk to the mental health trust, to work as a team. But we've been too nice for too long. And actually, I think we need to be a bit stronger. Not for everyone. That's why I get in trouble. I've been told I'm single-handedly responsible for the recruitment crisis in general practice because I'm too negative about things. So that's an accolade I'll take. What other kind of examples might you feel uncomfortable with? Well, anything about drug initiations? Maybe you get that request or that little slip of paper from the hospital saying, well, can you start someone on this drug you've never heard of? I had one the other week that was for adult ADHD, off licence, not on formulary, black triangle drug. Could I start it? No, I've never even heard of it. So if it's something you're not at all comfortable with, that's okay. You can go back and say that. If it's a shared care framework and that's been agreed but there's issues you're not happy with, then that may need raising as well. Making sure that you're fully aware of what that shared care framework involves and it has been agreed locally. Fit notes after surgery, do you have problems with these? Someone's been in 6 weeks recovery from whatever surgery they've had, we've given you a sick note for a week, see your GP for the rest. Ooh, no. And that's very difficult because quite often the patient's sat in front of you saying they said to come and see you, doctor, can I have a sick note for 5 weeks? And you feel a bit shitty going, no, actually you can't. So we need to judge that, don't we? And it may be right, yeah, I'll give you one, you'll hear this thing's daft, but then I'm going to write my stroppy letter. Any form of chasing, absolutely, whether it's bloods or histology. Again, we need to keep an eye on what's urgent, what needs acting on. But also we've got resources, we've got templates to use for this. The Quality Firster from the BMA is there and is easy to use and can be downloaded into your clinical systems. Do you ever have problems with the hospital prescriptions when people turn up with those? And it even says on ours locally, this is not an urgent prescription. Please give your GP 2 or 3 days to do it, and they come, don't they, want it straight away. Or prescriptions from private hospitals, where people have seen someone privately and they come with a private script and say, can you change that to an NHS script for me? That can be quite difficult as well. So having a really clear policy is very helpful. And sometimes with GPs it's like herding cats, isn't it, in practice meetings. But actually a clear policy on things like this makes your receptionist's lives a lot easier when they're dealing with the patient, when they're answering the phone, and also gives a consistent message to patients as well. How much of this kind of thing you can do and you want to do depends on what your job is. Because if you're a partner, if you're a single-handed partner, then you can go crazy and do whatever you want and put all these ideas into place. But actually, a lot of the time we're working in a team, aren't we? And you may have some people who are more or less keen on these kind of measures to reduce your workload. So first of all, we've got to talk to our staff, because often they're the ones that are dealing with this. We've got to agree how we're going to work, and we've got to do that consistently. It's no good if they know that on a Tuesday, Dr. Jones is on call, and he always is happy to do the letters or to sign the forms. That's not an issue. Talk about things like the GAMFID work. This is non-contractual work. Actually, are you charging appropriately? How much do you charge for GP time? Is it the right amount? Is it worth that? Or are you charging something far less and actually it's something you could be doing without? The worry is you end up like this, isn't it, with all these letters and forms and things. I had three this morning in my surgery that were put in my box. Now, I have to be corrected whether I've missed some on here, but these are forms that we contractually have to complete. Not a very big list, is it? So sick notes, forms from the DWP that have been directly requested. So no supporting letters when you've had the formal information from them asking you to fill the forms in, or anything else, fine. But any other stuff, patients coming asking for supporting letters for PIP appeals, anything like that, we don't have to do. Infectious diseases notifications, yeah. Medical certificate for cause of death. I think that's pretty much it. Are there any obvious ones that I've missed?
DVLA?
DVLA, yes. That's the one. That was a deliberate mistake, well done. So DVLA stuff we have to do as well.
So if I just go back to scenario 2,
Yes.
what about the people who come fear of flying and they want the diazepam?
Not going to get it from me.
No,
Say applies.
medical legally.
No. I think people feel differently about this, and I don't have a fear of flying. I don't have a fear of flying, but I certainly wouldn't want medication for it. But you're prescribing a drug to be administered prior to or during a flight in a pressurised cabin at X thousand feet.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll be drinking alcohol with it. You don't know what the reaction's going to be. It's the same. I don't prescribe for fear of flying. Now that's a personal take, but I think generally the advice is the same for the same reasons.
Okay, thank you.
So if you're asked to do anything other than this list and the DVLA stuff, then it may well be that you have a patient in front of you, and certainly for things like the DWP, I rarely do extra letters, but when I do, it's for a patient I really genuinely believe needs my help. They need me to be their advocate. For whatever reason, maybe their situation is unique, maybe I know them well, maybe I don't feel that they've been represented properly, and I will write that letter. But I do it once in a blue moon when I really believe that it's important and that it might make a difference, and then I will make myself completely available for that patient, for that appeal. But otherwise I don't do it.
What's going to happen with GDPR and the access, the right to access patient notes? Because I'm just thinking one of the common things will be there'll be a massive flurry of people, you know, from medical companies or health and insurance companies, whatever, requesting this. And that's going to take a lot of paper, time, printing, all of those costs, or lots of memory sticks or whatever.
Yeah.
There's lots of concerns with the data and what happened to the data to give to the patient. And it's not a form as such, but it's going to be something that's going to be very prevalent now. It's not.
It is. GDPR stuff's a nightmare, and I know that there's frantic peddling going on at GPC headquarters, as well as pretty much every organisation. The message essentially is no one really knows what's going to happen or how it's going to work. But if you're being asked to give information and it's not under a contractual obligation, then the simplest thing may be to say, actually, I can't do that. If it is something we're contractually obliged to do, then we're going to have been asked for the written consent. We need to make sure that we've met our obligations as data controllers and that whoever's asking for them has got those same procedures in place. It's a huge amount of work.
Because looking even with every solicitor requesting information, we need to set up an independent contract according to that wording with that solicitor before we can actually release the data.
So what kind of requests from solicitors would you envisage?
Something that say, please send us this data, we need the data sharing agreement between two groups before you can release that data. Is at least one of the interpretations of what the law means. So that would involve contract of union between every surgery and every single lawyer's firm in order to share the data. Or the alternative seems to be giving it to the patient individually and everything, saying you're responsible for your own data. Yeah,
and that's kind of the move for GDPR, isn't it? That it's the patient's data, that's theirs, they can do with it what they choose. I would avoid it and just say, I'm sorry, we don't do letters for solicitors or information for them as much as possible. We don't do those reports. If they want a medical report, they're going to need to commission it privately. But there's guidance coming out, and the guidance will, I'm sure, be frequently changing, and I would imagine there's going to be some coming out locally, but nationally there's lots coming out. And certainly sometimes it's a good way of saying, actually, I don't even want to go there, because it's a massive, massive amount of work. The other option is you price accordingly.
So we were trying to charge for it.
You come to solicitors.
No, you can't charge for the first request.
For
If it's excessive amounts of work,
yeah.
you can charge for it.
So you define excessive.
I'll touch on GDPR later and what we're doing.
You can doubt check me,
Obviously.
So the challenge with any forms like this, yes, it's work. It's work for you, it's work for your staff. But the other thing is you're legally responsible for anything you sign. So if you do get a request for any of these things, doctor, I can't go to court, I'm meant to be in court today, but I was poorly, could you sign this form, could you write a letter, could you support me with this penalty charge notice, I parked somewhere but because of my poorly leg, I'd like to skydive, doctor, the fact I'm 86 and I've got end-stage COPD and I'm on oxygen therapy, that's not an issue. I want to go diving, doctor, as my last gasp attempt to do something exotic. All of that, yes, we want to be helpful, and it's just a signature. But when it goes wrong, they'll say, well, why did you sign that form? How could you assure yourself that that patient was well enough to undertake these activities? And on some of the online groups, you find your colleagues who have ended up in front of a judge or in front of a coroner, and have been asked to justify that. And quite often it's not worth the workload and it's not worth the risk. And if you do have a patient it is worth it for, then we want to spend a bit more time on it. Yeah.
I get a lot of requests for the pregnancy fit to fly. And I don't know, I think MDU say the GP obliged to do some letter like this, but just worded carefully or something.
So the pregnancy fit to fly one is tricky, isn't it? And a lot of the airlines have their own guidance on their website as to what they feel is fit to fly. So our only job is to confirm a pregnancy. So if the patient has the MAP-B form, then they could use that. All we're stating is this patient's pregnant. I wouldn't get into any comment about whether they're fit to fly or not, because if you say they're fit to fly and there's a problem, that will come to you. You can say, this patient is currently 32 weeks pregnant with an expected due date of X.
The Civil Aviation Authority has a website, and on there it says, am I fit to fly? And I direct patients to that, and it's always up to date because it's their rules and regulations. It's a bit like the DVLA rules and regulations. If you direct patients to the website, they can find it for themselves.
Yeah. So usually it's worth sending them to either that or to the individual airline, because again, it feels awkward, but actually if there's an issue, we worry it would come back onto us.
On the issue of this, just coming to a military veterans, I had one recently wanting to go for this weekend training thing, and has some COPD. So I put on it, yes, you can go, but please be aware of the limitations. But at the same time, this is a patient I've known for nearly 20 years.
Yeah.
To say no to that particular person was very challenging. So I didn't feel I could say no. And yet, on another side, when I went to court and it collapsed, well, yeah, this is the reality of it's not easy to say no unless you start from the beginning and you just know that you're a sort of doctor.
And I think there's a balance, isn't there? I suppose it's whether or not you feel comfortable in that scenario. So if it's someone you know very well and you're happy to do it, great. But if it's someone you know very well and actually you really would rather not, then my approach personally is to say, I'm really sorry, the guidelines about what we can and can't do on this have changed and we're not allowed to issue these letters anymore. It's not your fault. I say that a lot with things like, so the Zopiclone you've been on for 25 years, yeah, the guidelines have just changed, you can't have that anymore. Because it's not your fault, you're not damaging that interpersonal relationship. You know, I'd love to help you, but I can't. So sometimes that's the conversation to have, and that's when it is a lot easier as a practice policy. Because then they don't say, oh, but Dr. Smith did one for my wife the other week. A lot easier to say, actually, it's not my right. So talking about things like this, if you are a partner in a practice, how are you going to handle these different ones? Maybe you'll say, actually, we're really happy to do the pregnancy fit to fly ones, we're going to charge for those, we're not concerned about it, that's great, but we're not happy to do these other ones, and we'll agree a policy on that. But some of you in this room, and some of your colleagues in practices, may well be the type of doctors who want to say yes to everything. And that's okay. You can't expect to go instantly and change everything and change completely the way people work. So looking at one thing at a time, what's the one thing that generates work in your practice? What's the one thing that your receptionists or your secretaries are always saying, oh, we've got loads of these, what's taking up their time? What do you find stressful to be asked about? So is it possible to say, well look, to begin with, the only thing we're going to do is say, actually, we're not going to issue any letters in support of benefit claims. That's it. That's our first rule, and we're going to see how that feels. So one thing at a time. One of the things that the Daily Mail forgets is that we're not charging people for this because we want to make money. We're charging because we don't really want them to come and ask for it again. It's about the deterrent. There's also a bit of it that's about valuing our time. We massively undervalue our time. And we tend to spend 40 minutes filling in massive forms and charging 20 quid for them. And it's not realistic at all. So either you decide this is something that's important to your practice as a business, yes it's an income stream, yes we want to keep that for business reasons, so we need to charge for that appropriately, or you say actually we've done the maths and the amount of time that we and our staff spend on it, it's not worth it. We're not going to do it. So you have some different ways of doing it. Now if you're salaried or if you're a trainee in a practice, or if you're locuming, then this kind of thing becomes a little bit tricky, doesn't it? If you're salaried or a trainee, it's really helpful to be able to make some constructive suggestions. It's no good going back to work tomorrow and saying, well, when's this talk about resilience and pushing back, and so I'm not going to do any of this. You can do it all. It's not going to go down that well, is it? So it's much better to use established guidance that's already there. So we've talked about the guidance about sedation for MRIs. That's out there. That's well established. That's a really helpful thing to use. Or to talk about some of the quality first or the local guidance, and take that and say, oh, I found out about this. Maybe it's something we could look at. If you locum, then it's really challenging if you find yourself in a practice where patients are used to having forms signed, they may bring them into the consultation, or they're used to having the diazepam for their flying, or they're expecting a certain thing to happen. And if everyone else in that practice does that all the time, then actually you being super resilient and putting your foot down and saying, no, I'm not even going to consider that, they're just going to go out and rebook the next day with someone else. And probably that practice is not going to use you again because it's just generating work. So there's a degree of flexibility needed, but you can't put yourself in a vulnerable position. And when I'm locuming, if I find myself in this situation, I'll go and ask someone, say that the patient's come with a form, they've asked for something to be signed, what do you normally do? And if they say, oh yeah, we're happy to sign those, that's great, brilliant, not a problem, I'll pass it to one of the regular GPs who knows the patient well to sign. We'll get it organised. Or if it is something that's just literally confirming facts, I may do it. But if actually they're asking me to sign something personally that I'm not happy with, or they're asking me to prescribe for a dental problem that I'm not keen on doing, then I need to put my own resilience in place. And just say to the practice, look, I'm afraid I haven't been able to do this for these reasons. Just going to finish off by talking a little bit about representation. Because half the battle with things like this, and with trying to empower colleagues and ourselves within our practices, is actually knowing where to go when there's a problem, and knowing who speaks for you. Here are some faces. They're so smiley. Look at them all. Right. You can tell me who some of these people are. I'll give you a clue. Two of them. If you don't get two of them right, it's going to be really embarrassing. So Alan up here, looking beautiful, is one of your GPC reps. So Alan's job is to take what the local LMCs are saying, to bring it to the GPs committee and to act as a liaison between that and between your LMCs. Anyone know who this chap is? He's not here, is he? This is awkward. That's Richard Brown. So he's the RCGP faculty chair for the North West. So when we talk about who represents us in different settings, sometimes it can be a bit confusing between LMCs and GPCs and BMA and RCGP. And we all do slightly different things. So that's RCGP. Who's that? No cheating, the people that know.
Richard Vaughtry.
Yeah, Richard Vaughtry. So he's chair of the GP's committee at the BMA. So Richard gets sent in to see Jeremy Hunt. Never lets me go. Who's that? Yeah, that's Helen Stokes-Lampard. She's the chair of the Royal College of GPs. And she's certainly doing a lot more now in the public eye in terms of GPs. She's on the news quite a lot, she's on talk things quite a lot, she's fairly present and visible. We know who this motley looking chap is. So we've got LMC support, and that's my slightly serious looking picture. So my role is for sectional doctors, so salaried locum GPs, out of hours GPs, urgent care GPs. So all of these people represent you, but they all represent you in a slightly different way. And trying to know how it all fits together can be a bit confusing. So welcome to the flow diagram from hell. We'll start down here. So we all know that your LMC represents you locally. And actually, there's lots of LMCs around the country that are doing that, all across the UK, representing their local doctors and their members. Now, in this area, your LMC feeds into an association of other LMCs who work together on bigger issues, and that's happening more and more around the country, and sometimes can be really helpful, especially somewhere like this, where they need a single voice to speak on big issues. Your LMCs then feed up to the LMC conference, which is held once a year. There's two of them, there's a UK one and an England one. And at that, your LMC will take issues, or take problems, or take ideas, and ask them to be debated amongst other LMCs and voted on. You may have seen stuff going around asking for LMC motions, and that's when you say things like, this conference believes that Jeremy Hunt's a rat bag. And someone stands up and talks about that, and then everyone has a moment and goes, bleh. And that forms policy. So if those votes are passed, if the motion is passed, which always just makes me think of bowel habits, but if the motion is passed, then that becomes binding on the GP's committee to deliver it. So LMC conference, your LMC will go, they'll say, we think X, Y, Z, we think GP should have a huge funding increase and have 50% of the NHS budget. Everyone votes yes, it goes to the GP's committee. And it's their job to try and deliver that. So it dictates policy. We have a GPC chair, which is Richard Vaughtry, and he has an executive team, a bit like a team of deputies that work with him. And alongside him are the policy leads. So they're in charge of particular areas. So for instance, there's a clinical and prescribing policy lead who's in charge of looking at guidance for that. There's an IT policy lead who's currently crying in a corner with all the GDPR stuff. And then there are subcommittee chairs. That's myself for sessionals and Tom Micklewright for trainees. So that's where, if you think, gosh, we're having problems with our premises, there's an issue with those, there's a problem with funding, you go to your LMC will say, right, we'll take it up with GPC, we'll find out for you. So it may go to Alan to take it up with GPC, or it may come straight up to the policy leads. And GPC is the GP's committee of the BMA. It's a slightly funny relationship, this, because to be part of your LMC, you don't have to be a BMA member. And to vote for your LMC, and to be involved in your LMC, you haven't got to be a BMA member at all. And the higher up you go, GP's committee of the BMA is largely funded by LMCs. It's funded by practices paying the levy. And then the BMA kind of sit at the top, so sometimes there's a little bit of tension there. BMA Council then tell the BMA what to do and make decisions, and we have the GPs committee, there's the junior doctors committee, there's the consultants committee, there's the specialty doctors committee. And they all have their own chairs, and they all feed into the BMA. It's a nightmare, isn't it? Trying to work out actually who you should ask when you have these problems. The reason your LMC is important, and this is from my point of view, is that they are at local level. The things that are bothering you in your consulting room, your LMC can help with. And I would love to stand here as sessional chair and say, I'm sure you all know the work I've been doing for salary of the locum GPs and the real difference it's made to your 10-minute consultation. But in reality, the thing that makes a difference in that consultation is probably work your LMC is doing at representing you, at trying to make things easier and making sure your workload is not higher. They should be able to support you with resilience. If you go to them and say, this is something our practice is finding difficult, what do you think? Can you help us? They should be able to. And if they can't give you the advice, if they don't know the advice, they can probably find out who does and can put you in touch with them. So if you're a partner and you're having problems in terms of your salaried GPs, you don't know what to do, you talk to the LMC, maybe they're not sure, it will probably come to me. And I'll probably ask someone else. But that's not good. So it's a good way of finding out different resources, different ways things are being done. And your LMC's voice then is heard nationally. And they're the ones who can really put pressure on and really can tell the story of what's going on for you locally. It's particularly important, I think, for younger GPs to be involved and for trainees to be involved. Because as things are changing in the NHS, and we're finding that partnerships are merging, we've got new models of care, we've got lots of APMS contracts, there's a threat to LMCs in terms of how they're funded. Actually, if the portfolio doctors and the salary doctors and the locum doctors don't get engaged with their LMC, then in a few years' time, who's going to be running the LMC? Who's going to be representing doctors? Who's going to be giving us that voice? And who's going to be talking to the CCGs and saying, actually, this is what should happen, or talking to the STPs? So we produced shiny guidance about sessional GPs and LMCs particularly working together. But really, it's about realising what's going on and going to a meeting and sitting and listening and finding out, oh, actually, no, I didn't know that. That's a useful resource. And just spreading the word a little bit. It's fascinating. And I'm certainly much more educated about it than I ever was before. I'm just going to leave that slide up to finish because I think it's a really useful slide to have and to know that there is support out there if you are struggling, if you are finding things difficult. I hope that's been helpful and given you some practical examples of the kind of things you can do. But resilience can be anything from actually knowing that you're going to go home that night, you're going to have a cuddle with your kids, you're going to put your feet up and watch trash on television. That could be your resilience. That could be the thing that de-stresses you after the day. It could be putting some of these templates into practice and saying no to extra workload. It could be something simple as reintroducing a coffee break. Do you remember when we used to have those? Where you saw your colleagues, you got a chance to stop for 20 minutes, maybe talk about visits. Maybe that's the thing that would make your resilience improve. So it's different for every individual. But actually knowing when to stop and knowing that you can say, do you know what, something needs to change here. I hope that's been useful. Thank you very much.